Morning, everybody. It's day 2 in Illinois here. I'm actually going to be heading back today, so hopefully we can get back to kind of a normal situation tomorrow. But I'm in Freeport, Illinois, which is, as I said yesterday, is a suburb of sorts of Rockford, Illinois, which is a suburb of Chicago. We're under 2 hours away from downtown Chicago here. Chicago is a very interesting microcosm into the American racial story, and there's a great deal of inequity between black and white anywhere in the country, but Chicago is a pretty extreme example. And the black population often moves out of places like Chicago to go to Rockford to try to find work, then to Freeport, and eventually up to places like Madison and Minneapolis. You know, the migration kind of followed that path. Looking for black records in Minneapolis from the 50s and 60s is pretty hard to find up there. By the 70s, the population starts showing up. 80s and 90s, there's definitely a pretty good black presence in the Twin Cities. But first of all, I want to say I'm really discouraged. The George Floyd situation, it really lit a fire under people, and the witnessing of that video firsthand, it really brought people from across the aisle and made them understand that this was unmistakably wrong. And for a second, it felt like maybe we could find some unity and a better tomorrow. But here we are, a couple weeks removed, and scrolling my Facebook feed, which, as I've told people, has over 1,000 African Americans on it and probably 2,000 white Americans on it. It's absolutely disgusting to see the political divide happening, the amount of posts that get shared and passed around endlessly that aren't from legitimate news sources. People, stop sharing stuff that's not from a legitimate news source. Fact check. And it's just driving me insane. Fucking motorcycle, what a jerk. It's driving me insane. They are trying to demonize George Floyd now and make him out to be just nothing more than an abject criminal. And it's clearly being done so that when the trial happens for the police, they'll have so made George Floyd such a bad guy that the public opinion hopefully will have been swayed enough that if they don't find these guys guilty, that the majority of Americans will be just fine with that. Some of the posts I've seen, what they're not telling you about George Floyd is this criminal act and this criminal act. It doesn't fucking matter what he did. None of it justifies you committing homicide against the guy. None of it explains you putting your knee on the guy's fucking neck and choking the life out of him. It's absolutely of no consequence. It doesn't matter what he's done. The courts should be the measuring stick here, not some rogue vandalist justice by some vigilante cops. Apparently this cop and George Floyd worked together at a bar. There's some stories now, I don't know if they're true, about there being some counterfeiting of money, and George Floyd was kind of a security force for these counterfeiters, and he was flashing some money around, and that this was an assassination to silence a guy who they thought was maybe being a loose cannon. If that's true, that makes the cops just as much criminals on the conspiracy and counterfeit charges as it does George Floyd. But nothing that you can say this guy did justifies what happened to him. And I saw this one really attractive woman yesterday on my Facebook she had posted multiple posts that were just inflammatory. And she was drawing all these liberals into her bait with just racist, vitriolic rhetoric. And it was ugly, and the posts were getting taken down, and she would repost them. And it only took me reading what she was saying for a few minutes before I became fairly convinced she wasn't the one typing any of these responses. She was a pretty face. She was stripper, high level, high quality, like the makeup, everything. She was really gorgeous, slutty looking blonde that was saying stuff that I don't think her mind was capable of conjecturing in an open debate, open forum. It didn't seem like the profile matched the information that it was being shared. It seemed like it was just a inflammatory tool. And it just really causes me to be discouraged to see how much the left and the right are both being provoked into outrage. And it's so clear. There's just nothing but post after post after post that's making liberals furious and conservatives furious. And any stitching together and commonality that we achieved in the moments after the Floyd video came out, it's only taken them 2 weeks to push us further apart than when we started. And it's just discouraging. It's just disheartening. And it's not going to get better. I'm so beyond the point of thinking that this is a salvageable situation. You know, America's rotting to its core. And I'm in, like I said, Freeport, Illinois. And I want to show you guys some of the urban decay that exists even in a town of 27,000 people that's, like I said, not too far from Chicago. This town was once a pretty wealthy, booming center before the war, and it was a center of insurance industry, and there was a lot of wealth. The blacks started moving in after the war, and it just leads to a very run-down, tax base departs. There's just home after home that's in disrepair. You'll get a nice one here and there. There's so much poverty in this town. So many boarded up buildings. So much ugly retail. It's just, the living conditions are so bad. And I just don't think people in Europe, look at this building up ahead of us here. It's a beautiful old brick apartment building that's falling apart. It's just coming apart at the seams. And people live in there. We're coming into downtown here, and I'm going to try to show you guys some of this urban decay and have you understand what the American black citizen is being asked to live through. And employment opportunities are limited. Criminal activity is a way of life because there's not a ton of other options. We think a lot of this stuff is just in the movies, I think, sometimes. And I don't think people who live in France or Belgium or Italy or Scandinavia really have much of a sense of what decay is like it is here in America. It's just, it just shouldn't be. It just shouldn't be. There shouldn't be so many dilapidated buildings and windowless buildings. And the American dream is what we're talking about here. And we're supposed to be this wealthy empire. And the wealth distribution is so unequal that where you have large centers of minorities is in these large urban centers and even mid-sized urban centers like this. And they use the poverty and the minorities to eventually displace enough of the white patrons. Like they can eventually come in and condemn all of the properties and then rejuvenate them with urban renewal and displace all those people. They use race to set up property and real estate. And no one bats an eyelid. No one seems to care. And there's just such a kind of depressed, destitute language in the air. There's so many unhappy, without hope, and it's not going to get better. You know, and like I said, 2 weeks after the George Floyd incident, to see my Facebook feed and to see the amount of misinformation and the amount of conspiracies and the fomenting of outrage. And I gotta tell you, the liberals on the left are just as complicit. They're just as much being pulled by the puppet master. It just angers me. It's so sad. And you can see some of the buildings that exist here. It was once a very well-to-do, insurance-built town, and white flight, you know, it just guts the tax base and destroys the fabric. And as the poverty comes in, crime and desperation come with it. And it's to the point where a town of 27,000 people, a lot of white folks are scared to come into it. My mother-in-law lives on the outskirts in a kind of white subdivision, and she's raised very conservative, and the TV she watches and the Facebook groups that she subscribes to and the messages that she sees are all so inflammatory and so negative and so derogatory towards the black American that she lives in fear all the time. And this is America. Like, this is not me just throwing out conjecture and saying, oh, this is a problem. I don't think people get it. I don't think people see how divided by design we are. And I think if you're in Europe, it's much harder to grasp. Now look at some of these homes. These are some of the richer white homes. And these are wonderful homes, but even their property values have plummeted due to the crime and the racial makeup of this town. Look at this mansion here. Just some big, beautiful homes in certain parts of this town, Freeport. And like I said, other parts of this town are boarded up and shuttered and just dens of poverty. And I just, it makes my heart hurt. And we wonder why, when these people are provoked that they want to protest, we wonder why the white conservatives are so scared. But it's all because of how they're taught and what they're exposed to. And the white conservative rednecks are convinced that the blacks are the enemy, and the blacks are outraged because there's no justice. And the appearance of injustice isn't by some chance. There are events in this country that by design are meant to look unequal. They want things to look outrageous and so unfair that it constantly foments rage and fury in people. And I don't know, it's tough. So I just want to kind of share a little bit of that. I'm gonna let you guys go for now. I should be back tomorrow, and hopefully I'll get an episode done. If not, it'll be the following day. But the amount of broken down buildings in this town just left for the poorest of the poor, and the limited opportunity for them. It's sure not the America that we see on television. It's ugly. And when you see the beautiful streets of Paris and the cities of Scandinavia, in Italy, in Switzerland, Germany, there's a strong middle class. There's social programs that keep people off the streets. There's just so much more equality, first of all. And all the protesting, all the rioting, all the petitions, all the Facebook posts, all the polarity, it's all part of the design. It's all designed to keep us so divided and to keep us so at each other's throats and to keep us perpetual enemies so that the fabric can never be stitched together. And I just can't stand it. You know, even Canada, right across the border, Detroit has a sister city across the border called Windsor, Ontario. And the level of poverty in Windsor is a fraction of what it is in Detroit. The level of safety and gun violence. And that's the other thing. You add to this the amount of guns in this country and the unregulated nature of that industry. And it just leads to body count. And it just leads to rivers of tears. Rivers of tears. And too many mothers mourning the loss of their children. Too many children mourning the loss of their sisters and their brothers. And I don't think any petition, any riot, any protest, any election can change the course of what is. This is all driven by a larger blueprint. And again, 2 weeks in to this new reality after George Floyd, and there's more vitriol and anger from the two polar sides than there was before. There's more pointing fingers and all these posts trying to, George Floyd wasn't a good guy. So fucking what? He didn't deserve to die with a knee on his throat. You know? And there's no fact checking. There's no responsible sharing of posts. It's just, oh, that made me angry. Let me share this so my friends can also be angry. And so the echo chamber just increases. And with every incident, the divide gets greater and bigger. And the brief moment that empathy crosses both sides of the bridge and makes us see that there's something wrong, it's so quickly erased by the strong fundamental movements of the two sides. And it's all being orchestrated by the same power structure. It's all being set up by the same ruling elite. And jazz is right in the crosshairs. You know, jazz has always been the testament of what this nation is and how this nation exists. And there's just no excuse for so many people to live without health care, I don't have health care, for so many people to live without education, so for so many people to live in broken down, dilapidated, boarded up buildings. I'm trying to find this one stretch of streets where it looks so worse than a third world shanty town. And what was once beautiful homes have just fallen into such disrepair, and it just makes me want to tear up. You know, it just makes me want to leave this country for once and for all. Me and my wife talk about it at times, but picking up your family and your kids and leaving my brothers and my mom in her last few years, it's all much more difficult than just the want to move. You know, people do it, but I don't know. So anyway, I'll be back home tomorrow, and we should be able to get into some fun new subject matter. I just wanted y'all to see and share some of what I'm seeing. And again, my Facebook feed the most is what's just got me so discouraged. There's no end in sight. There's no justice around the corner. Things are going to get worse. Things are going to get more violent, more chaotic. There's going to be more injustice. There's going to be more people suffering so that the rich can maintain that wealth. And if you make people suffer for your greed, I just really think that the cosmos will judge you, and judge you hard. So y'all be safe. We'll talk to y'all soon. Y'all be blessed. Peace.